And welcome on in, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King, joined here by our recruiting expert, Christian Clemente. Jason Caldwell on a well-deserved vacation this week, so he'll be back on the show
Just realized my
next
mic is
week. And
muted, but yes, he is.
yeah, lots of it's been a busy several months there for Jason. Once golf and baseball wrapped up, it was like, all right, Jason, we'll get you some time, get you some time on the mend for a little bit. But it'll be me and Christian today talking about Auburn recruiting, as the primary part of official visit summer is kind of over now. As we were talking about before we got rolling, Christian, they go dead here. Is it next week they'll go dead?
Next Monday.
6
Yep.
weeks? Next Monday. Okay, so then 6 weeks after that. So
Well, no, it's dead for all the way until the season for recruiting.
Yeah.
So this was the last. I mean, this week there's some unofficial visitors coming in. There was a D lineman on campus on Monday and a receiver on campus on Tuesday. But they're done with official visits. The final week of July that's normally open and that's usually that Big Cat weekend. That's not there anymore. The NCAA changed it. That whole week is dead. So the next time a recruit's going to be on campus after this week is over is the second game of the season, the first home
Ball
game.
State.
Oh yeah.
Easy come, easy go for the recruiting summer. But Auburn had a number of official visitors in, particularly last week. When you combine the midweek visitors they had, which were a couple ones of note, with the weekend visitors, it ended up being a pretty decent list. And so got a couple questions here from you guys, but mainly we're just going to just kind of wrap things up on where Auburn stands after official visit season. Christian, let's talk just most recently about this past weekend. The guys who were on campus, obviously the headliner there being a guy like Braylon Womack, the 5-star safety, but just kind of run us through who was on campus and what kind of progress you felt like Auburn made, and who are the names that we should know from that.
Yeah, it wasn't the biggest weekend in terms of numbers. I mean, there were only 6 guys on campus, but it was 6 very important visits, kind of all for different reasons. 3 of them were commitments, but all 3 of them were some of your most important isn't the right word, but commitments that are a little bit up in the air, guys that you felt like you had to fight to keep holding on to. So all 3 of those guys were extremely important. They weren't coming in as commitments where they were, everything's all peachy, everything is great. It was, they were coming in and Auburn was fighting to hold on to them. So those guys were important. And then you mentioned, guys like Braylon Womack, C.D. Morgan, E.J. Crowell, the running back from Jackson. All 3 of those guys are huge targets that Auburn need to make a move for. Kind of work down the list here. Actually, we'll go position by position. Start on offense. Start at running back. Xavier Crowell, he's committing June 26th. Look, going into the visit, felt like it was Alabama. Going out of the visit, still feel like it's Alabama. He's officially visiting Alabama this next weekend. Just don't really get the warm and fuzzies for Auburn in his recruitment. Just doesn't really feel like that's one that Auburn is going to be invested in fully to be able to win. And so that's just one that don't get a great feel about. But we won't spend a whole lot of time on him. At receiver, that was the big position this weekend. C.D. Morgan, obviously the 5-star, but then your 2 commitments, Devin Carter, Daenerius Gray, they were both in on a visit. I feel like Nathan is frozen. He is. He said he lost power. So it's just me. I feel like we're going to lose half the live viewership here, knowing it's just me and Nathan's not here anymore. But talking about the receivers, C.D. Morgan, that's a guy who committing July 2nd, 5-star who's been on campus. He joked. He said he's been on campus a million times. Not entirely wrong. He's been to campus a ton. From Benjamin Russell. After dark with Nathan, he's back.
We were on the hot spot, baby. I just lost power. I'm glad you still have it. Continue. I'm going to go get a phone charger.
Okay. So C.D. Morgan, he was back in. Look, he's a guy who's really familiar with Auburn, really familiar with this staff. Marcus Davis has been recruiting him since his freshman year. One of the most interesting things to me, one of his most interesting comments was, he knows Malcolm Simmons, his former teammate. He knows Perry. He knows Cam Coleman. He knows Bryce Kane. He knows all those guys. He spent time around them. But the guy that he said he really hears from the most and spent the most time with in terms of current players on the team, Deuce Knight. He said Deuce has been on him really heavily, been pitching him on Auburn. And that's been a pretty common theme, because when you talk about Devin Carter, it's the same thing. He said he talks to Deuce Knight a ton. He said, I think it was Saturday night on the official visit, him and Deuce went over to the facility and he just did like kind of a workout with Deuce, ran some routes, and Deuce was throwing to him. Deuce, these recruits all know Deuce, but he is making an effort to get to know them as well. And that's something that you definitely want out of your 5-star freshman quarterback. Talking about Devin Carter there, Florida State has been making a really big move. He was committed to the Seminoles previously. He's a legacy there for those that don't know. Dexter Carter is his dad. Played there, I believe, in the 80s, before my time. That's all I know. Jason could give you that answer. He knows Dexter Carter very well. But that legacy factor, he was committed there before, decommitted. FSU is back in the picture. Hosted him a couple of times in the spring. He was back for his official visit here in June. After that official visit, FSU was garnering some buzz. But take him at his word. He pretty well shut that down. In his post-Auburn visit comments, he said, look, I felt like Auburn was home after my Florida State visit. I still feel like Auburn is home after my Auburn visit. He's going to keep taking visits, so this one is not over. Those were positive comments, but there's still a ways to go here. He'll probably be at the opener that Florida State has hosting Alabama. He'll probably be at that one. Florida State is going to keep fighting, keep being in this picture. But Auburn right now feels confident about holding on to him. Welcome back, Nathan. And then the final receiver, Daenerius Gray. He was back on campus. He's been committed like 18 months now. That's crazy to think about, especially in modern day recruiting. He committed on New Year's Day in 2024. And there hasn't been a whole lot of talk really about him since that point. He doesn't say a lot. He doesn't really post about visits that he's taken. He doesn't really interview much. He just quietly goes through the process. But we know that he's taken official visits to Kentucky, Washington, NC State, going to Ole Miss this coming weekend. But he's saying all the right things about his Auburn commitment. One of the things that I really wanted to learn going into the weekend was how much does Auburn value his commitment? Because they obviously they have him committed, they have him in the class, and most of those guys, they want to keep almost always. Sometimes there's commitments where there's mutual parting of ways. That wasn't going to happen with Daenerius, but my question was, is Auburn going to fight for this guy? When other schools are putting up a fight, is Auburn going to push back? And the answer I've gotten so far is yes. They like this guy enough that they're going to fight to keep him in the class. So while Kentucky and Ole Miss and these other schools are making moves, Auburn's not going to let him go easily. So that's wrapping up the receivers that were on campus. And then talk about Shadarius Toodel, another one that's committed, who gone through his official visits. He saw Georgia, he saw Michigan, he saw Baylor. He's seen these other schools. Georgia was the school that garnered the most buzz, to the point where he named Georgia his leader after that official visit, which is kind of crazy, but that's modern day recruiting. Committed to Auburn, but said, look, Georgia's my number one school. And I appreciate the honesty as well. It makes it easier on us, a little bit less guessing when he says stuff like that, or when recruits say stuff like that. But this was a guy that I felt pretty confidently, even after he named Georgia his leader, that Auburn was going to fight for. DJ Durkin really likes this guy as a Mike linebacker. He's had him committed since Big Cat last year. It was not the same scenario as Jermichael Garrett, where it was kind of going their separate ways. Auburn was recruiting other guys. Auburn has been recruiting other Mike linebackers as insurance plans, more so than as replacements like it was for Garrett. You have to keep recruiting other guys. Jason and I have talked about it on the show previously. If Toodle is going to go around and visit other schools, you've got to bring other guys in for visits. You have to have those insurance plans in place. But Auburn always wanted to keep Shadarius Toodle. And after this visit, he said Auburn is back in the top spot for him. Within the next week, maybe next week, he plans to announce a final decision, shutting down his recruitment, either sticking with Auburn or flipping to one of those other schools. Right now, I feel like Auburn is in a good spot to be able to maintain his commitment. And then the final guy that was on campus this weekend, 5-star safety Braylon Womack, the number one safety in the country, a guy who Auburn has been pushing pretty much all of the right buttons for since he got offered in January. Auburn was late to the game for whatever reason, but as soon as TJ Rushing took over when Charles Kelly departed, he offered him quickly. His sister, Manaya, I think. I'm forgetting her name, but she's on the softball team. So he's been to campus a ton. Um, he was another guy who joked, we said, first time in Auburn. He's like, no, this is like my 50th time in Auburn. And that was one of the more interesting things. Oh, Nathan has power. Oh, maybe not. He's still here though, either way. In the ongoing cycle here. For those that are listening to the podcast later, they're going to be very confused because Nathan's been muted this whole time. But if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the lights going off and see what's happening. But anyways, with Braylon, been here a ton. So this official visit was treated a little bit differently. He said, I was not sitting in the meetings. I wasn't going to the academic meeting. I wasn't going to the nutrition. I wasn't a defensive meeting. He said, I've been through all of those meetings. I've done those on unofficial visits before. His unofficial visits have been weekends at a time previously. He comes to see his sister play softball, and he's spending days at the football facility. He's basically taken official visits to Auburn beforehand, just without all the rah-rah and all the pictures and whatnot. So this was about getting him comfortable around the current players, getting him comfortable around the coaches. And it, by all accounts, it worked. He said, this was the best official visit I've taken. He's already seen Texas A&M. He's already seen Florida. But the big question mark will be, he goes to Ohio State this next weekend, and that's really kind of been the team to beat for a while. So can Auburn weather that storm? He commits on August 22nd, so there's still a ways to go. There's a couple months to go. But for those that have not read his story, I would highly recommend going to read the article on Braylon after his OV. I mean, he is one of the most insightful recruits, 17, 18 years old, whatever he is. He's probably, he might be smarter than I am, and I'm coming up on 25 now. I mean, he is very, very wise in terms of how he approaches recruiting. So, whatever school he ends up picking, getting a good player and getting a good person as well. But feel like Auburn has positioned itself, as Jyra Edwards. There's been kind of two top safety targets, Jyra Edwards and Braylon Womack, both 5 stars. As Jyra Edwards has trended towards Alabama over recent weeks, feels like Auburn has now kind of used that and made its move, and is picking up steam with Braylon Womack, with obviously a couple months to go there.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously, you're the expert here. You can sort of drive this to wherever we want to go next. I mean, my questions as someone who is coming a bit from the outside looking in, you touched on JaMychal Garrett a little bit. Obviously, I was MIA there for a couple minutes, but I know that was something that, and you mentioned it the day he decommitted, did not come as a massive surprise. You had kind of communicated that over time to our subscribers, but it seemed like, at least from my perspective, that then getting a really good visit with a guy like Daenerius Toodel felt like a really important sort of follow-up, even though losing, even though JaMychal Garrett wasn't a massive thing because it had been expected for a while. It seemed like them having a really good visit with Toodel was obviously pretty important.
Yeah, it was big. I mean, that is the new era of recruiting that we're in at this point. You need to get guys committed, and then you have to win their recruitment a second time, maybe a third time, for guys that are really good and are being pursued by top schools. And for Auburn, Daenerius Toodel was one of those guys where we've seen it in previous cycles in Auburn, Georgia recruiting battles when it comes to in-state guys for Auburn. Auburn has not gone over the state line over to Georgia and beaten Georgia for some of their top guys. That's a hump this staff has not been able to get over yet. But when you talk about in-state guys, I mean, Joe Phillips was all but set to go to Georgia. Eric Winters was all but set to go to Georgia. Daenerius Toodel named Georgia his leader. And I mean, it's obviously not over yet with Toodel, but point being, this staff has been able to assert itself in keeping in-state guys and beating out Georgia for them for their priorities. And for linebacker, it's going to be a bigger class. They want to take a couple inside guys, couple outside guys. Toodel is one of their main Mike linebackers, and then Jaquez Wilkes is the other main inside linebacker. And then with Garrett off the board now, you're looking at Aligun Ali as an outside guy. You're looking at him. TJ White officially visited this month. He's more of a Mike linebacker. I think he was more of a potential Toodle replacement than anything else. I feel like I'm drawing a blank on one other linebacker name. Anthony Davis visited, but not really feeling him. Feels like if Auburn could get Toodle solidified. Get Jaquez Wilkes. Wilkes can be kind of a hybrid. He can play inside, outside a little bit. He can even be an edge rusher. And then get Goon, get Aligun Ali. That would be a really strong trio that I think Auburn would be really, really happy with in this class. We might have lost Nathan again. His power is apparently really struggling tonight. Has been storming a lot. Not storming tonight, though. Oh, Nathan's back. There we go. Nathan, I know you have a ton of recruiting questions. What else do you have for me?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on Landon Duckworth, just I think momentarily, unless you did it a lot while I was gone. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. You didn't. Okay, all right. Well, I'll bring it up entirely then. I visited last week, as we record this here on a Tuesday. Kind of bring us up to speed on maybe there was a little bit of, I don't know if surprise is the right word, but
it is
pleasant news that he ended up taking that visit. Because I know there have been some trends, some crystal balls, all that kind of stuff you wanna talk about for other programs. And I think, as you reported, it seems like Auburn is still firmly in the picture for its top quarterback in the 26 class.
Yeah, quarterback recruiting has been interesting over the past couple of years. I mean, you just think back to last cycle. KJ Lacey, Husan Longstreet, Juju Lewis, back to Deuce Knight, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and figuring out who they kind of want to lock in on. It was not easy to get to Deuce Knight. It was not easy to get to that point. This cycle, it felt like a little bit more of, take a little bit of a lower ranked, maybe a little bit more of a developmental quarterback, not spend as much money on a quarterback in the 2026 cycle, because look, you just bought 3 quarterbacks in one cycle. You bought Jackson Arnold out of the portal, Ashton Daniels out of the portal, Deuce Knight out of high school. So 5-star and 2 portal quarterbacks, probably not cheap. And as we're entering a new era of revenue sharing with the salary cap and then NIL on top of that, you have to be cap conscious about how you approach your roster and where you're stacking positions class after class, how you're doing that. It just felt like Auburn was setting up to not spend a lot of money on a quarterback this class. Travis Burgess was that guy that we were watching pretty closely. Auburn felt like he could fit, but North Carolina really, really liked him, and I think they gave him an offer that Auburn was not quite willing to keep up with or match. I don't think that they felt like that was a situation that they had to keep pursuing. So then after Burgess came off the board, it was like, okay, well, Duckworth is still here, and Burgess committed right before Duckworth's OV that May 30th to June 1st weekend. But it didn't feel like a lot of things changed at that point. It still felt like, Duckworth came in, he had a good visit, but is Auburn really going to pony up the money? Still didn't quite feel like it at that point. Felt like, maybe go get not even take a quarterback. But just when you're expecting a right turn in Auburn quarterback recruiting, it's not going left. There's a U-turn. Something's dramatic is changing. And that was Duckworth cutting his list down to 2 schools, Auburn and South Carolina. And then popping up for a visit. And all of the intel coming out of that visit has been extremely positive. South Carolina is going to be really tough to beat. That was where he was committed previously. They are invested in his recruitment in multiple different ways. But Auburn is investing in this recruitment now too. And that's not something that I thought would happen. And I think that was a recent change. I think Auburn decided that you can look at it 2 different ways. Do you want to alternate cycles basically and take a top guy, a developmental guy, top guy, developmental guy? Or do you just want to keep stacking a room? Do you want to try and keep getting as much talent as possible? Maybe you're sacrificing a receiver and a linebacker or something like that money-wise for another quarterback. Would you prefer to always have a quarterback kind of coming through that you really believe in and believe can contribute quickly? Or do you want to alternate? And I'm not saying there's a right answer either way. But right now, Auburn is kind of in the approach of keep stacking that room. And they have turned up the heat on Landon Duckworth. The thing that'll be really interesting to watch is he's at Elite 11 out in California this week. I think he got there today on Tuesday. I think the event goes until Friday maybe, or goes through Friday. He mentioned trying to get back to South Carolina for a visit. So if he flew straight from LA to South Carolina, that could happen and he could visit on Saturday or Sunday. But it was not very solidified. It was very kind of up in the air. Like, if I can get back, I might take another visit to South Carolina. So if that happens, hold on. Let's really kind of see how much Auburn can weather that storm. But right now, it feels like Auburn getting that potential last visit pretty big going into. He plans to commit in July. He doesn't have a date set yet, but that's his plan. It feels like Auburn is starting to push the right buttons for him. We'll see if Auburn can get across the finish line. But it is, you said surprise. It has been a very big surprise the way that things have turned in quarterback recruiting this cycle.
And that's the case every year. Like, quarterback has the most volatility. I mean, how many crazy twists and turns were there with Deuce Knight before he ended up arriving at? I mean, I know I thought you were you were getting pulled every which way throughout that process. So you really never know. But I mean, I think Jason has brought it up before on shows. You mentioned like stacking talent, particularly in the quarterback room. You may lose a receiver. You may lose somebody else you want to funds for in that class. You may lose a quarterback. You may lose the quarterback from the previous year who is not thrilled necessarily about you stacking top 50 recruits. But I think Jason has brought up the point many times, like nowadays, especially in the portal era where people can leave so quickly, you just got to get as many good players as possible. Like, I mean, you really cannot worry that much. And I think Auburn has obviously put themselves in that situation. We just saw an example of it last year with, I know Walker White was a bit of a surprise, like to this staff. Like, it wasn't the most expected thing for him to leave because you got Deuce Knight in here and new quarterback in Jackson Arnold. And he obviously didn't want to stay. And so you run that quote risk a little bit, but I think the ultimate reward is that you have a more talented quarterback room.
I'm going to cut you off real quick. Here's the one good thing in that aspect is the guy who has maybe pitched Auburn the most to Landon Duckworth is Deuce Knight.
Is Deuce Knight, yep.
They train together at Quarterback Country down in Mobile. David Morris is their quarterback coach. They're really close friends. And we asked Duck, is Deuce being here kind of, do you look at the quarterback room as crowded? How do you kind of look at it? And he said, got to go compete anywhere. Now, people are going to say those things. You can only play one quarterback, obviously. So eventually something would have to give, but it's not a hindrance to Duckworth that Deuce is here. And Deuce is recruiting Duckworth to be here. So you can take that for however you want, but I would take it as positive.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you mentioned an upcoming July commitment for him, kind of a segue into what I wanted to ask next about guys that'll be on your radar within the next couple weeks. That's a question that can be reset every few weeks, but I know CD Morgan is also somebody that has a commitment coming up relatively soon in early July. So you got him, Duckworth. Anyone else you'll be keeping your eyes out for in July?
Yeah, there's a lot. All of these guys are trying to commit in July. I will have a story in terms of running down all the potential, all the commitment dates of these guys that we know. I'm going to just go through the list of official visitors and try and run down. I'm going to go down all like 50 guys as quickly as I can, or some of them are already committed, so I don't have to worry about them. CD Morgan, he's July 2nd. Braylon Womack in August. EJ Crowell is June 26th. Caden Prothero sometime in July. Craig Tutt, TBD. Danny Odom, end of June, but not really feeling that one. Devontae Anderson, TBD. Manny Iannacho, early August, but not feeling it. Nolan Wilson, July. Jace Matthews is pretty open. JC Anderson, that's a really good one to watch. July 1st, tight end from Illinois. I feel like Auburn has a great chance there. Claude Puma, sometime in July. Xavier Tiller, keep watching him in July, but he'll kind of depend on what happens with JC Anderson. Preston Carey, June 30th. Jaira Edwards, July 5th. Jaquez Wilkes, probably sometime in July. Not sure on TJ White. Tyreek Green is July 12th, I believe. Valdin Sone is pretty open. Wilson Zaire is going back home to Germany, and then we'll have a commitment sometime after that within the next couple of weeks here. Anthony Davis, not entirely sure. I think he's July at some point. Tank Jones still figuring out a date. Derek Cooper, not feeling that one. Bryce Perry-Wright, Auburn's not in his top group. Trent Henderson, probably not. Trent in Florida, and that could happen soon. Jay Lamar is June 25th, but not feeling Auburn there. Ernest Rankins, he's one to keep an eye out on. He doesn't have a commitment date set yet, but I would definitely keep an eye on him. I think Georgia has cooled on him a little bit, which could open the door for Auburn. Vodney Cleveland is later this week, June 21st. Feeling Florida or Texas, though. CJ Hester is July 1st. Not feeling Auburn there right now. Aligun Ali, need to check on that one because I think he could come off the board within the next couple of weeks and not entirely sure. But that's definitely one to keep an eye out on. Same goes for Deron Parks, the offensive lineman from Florida. And then the last one is Dalton Toothman. He'll be committing next Monday, the 23rd. So that's all of the guys that have officially visited that are either not committed to Auburn or not committed elsewhere. Don't quote me on all of those. That's all off the top of my head, just looking at it, but feel pretty confident about most of them in terms of their dates. So all of that being said, I just listed off like 40 guys, whatever it was. They're all going to be committing within the next couple of months here. That's just the way kind of recruiting is going now. There's official visit season, there's commitment season, there's the season, and then there's flip season. I don't know how fruitful commitment season is going to be for Auburn. I think a lot of guys want to see the product on the field this fall. I think this new era of revenue sharing and NIL, Auburn is being careful. Not that Auburn doesn't have the money. Auburn has the money. They've proven that. But I think they're trying to be careful in not shooting themselves in the foot by throwing out deals, throwing out numbers to guys, and then not having a full grasp of what this revenue sharing really looks like and having to go back on those deals. So I think Auburn is being careful. Look, no recruitment is fully shut down until signing day. Auburn knows that. Recruits know that. Recruits are going to keep talking to schools. I don't care if Auburn goes into the season with 5 commitments or 15 commitments. If Auburn does what it needs to do on the field this fall, if Auburn can go 8-4, something like that or better, shows improvement, Auburn's going to sign a top 10 class. It's going to happen. The staff did not forget how to recruit. I know people are freaking out right now because the class is not in a great spot. Guys are trending elsewhere. Hasn't been the best summer in terms of commitments and landing guys and getting momentum. I don't really care. The staff has proven it. They can get it done if they get it done on the field. But that's what matters the most right now.
And it's very different, and that's exactly what I wanted to talk about sort of last here. So I'm glad you brought it up. It's very different feeling than year 1 and year 2. Me and Dukes were talking about this on his show a couple of weeks ago in terms of like what you need to do on the field. It feels very, very different. Number one, because you have to start, recruits are not naive. They know more than we do 90% of the time when it comes to a lot of this stuff, but they understand that it's time for some proof of concept. And also there's the other element of if Auburn goes a good 7-5, 8-4, maybe 9-3, people probably had a physical reaction when I said 7-5. If they do that, that probably informs some wins over other good SEC teams. Like you beat a Georgia or a Alabama at home. You beat a Texas A&M, you beat an Oklahoma. People like that, where that's other teams that are involved for some of these players. I just think it feels a lot different. And you sort of just underscored that. We weren't really having these types of conversations. I mean, I think you were saying last summer, like, it probably doesn't matter that much. Obviously, Auburn would like to have a good season, but then they ended up going 5-7, and they ended up having a really good recruiting class. It seems like your language, and people around the program, and Jason has said this too, like it's a little bit different this time around. The entire staff is in prove it mode, and we've known that since the spring. Hugh Freeze was not afraid of saying that in spring, and obviously it trickles down to recruiting as well.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this earlier, so I'm really glad you prompted me. You brought this up in my head. Auburn has 7 commitments right now. Auburn could probably have like 20 commitments right now if it wanted, but not 20 of the caliber players that they want, that they have been recruiting over the past couple of years. They would not have 20 of Cam Coleman and Malik Autry and Jordan Crawford and Anquan Fagans. They could have 20 guys, but not of the guys that they believe that it takes to win at this level. And those guys, you're recruiting against Ohio State. You're recruiting against Alabama, Georgia, USC, LSU, Michigan, whoever. You're recruiting against some of the top dogs. You're kind of the odd one out there at this point. You haven't been recruiting, or you have not been competing at the national level like those schools have been in recent years. So to be able to beat those schools at this point, the past couple of years, you sold the future and you sold hope. Hope, maybe not the right word there, but you sold the future. At this point, you can't sell that anymore. You have to start winning those games, and we've talked about that ad nauseum on this show, and I'm sure other shows have talked about it as well. But point being, if you can do that on the field this fall, you'll be right. You're right there with those recruits right now. After going 5-7, you're right there. They just want to see a little bit more. They want to see it, and it probably doesn't help. Look, it's recruiting. It doesn't help. Other schools are going to be negatively recruiting against you. They are going to be saying, "Look, Auburn went 5-7 last year. That staff is cooked. They're going to get fired. It's over. They're not good." That's going to happen. Auburn is getting negatively recruited against, and every school gets negatively recruited against. That's just the way it goes. But Auburn is fighting an uphill battle. So it will take a product on the field this fall. But like you said, you get some of those wins. Think about how important the Iron Bowl could be. I mean, the moved up signing day, where signing day is the week right after the Iron Bowl. Whoever gets to host the Iron Bowl now, and we've talked about this last year, whoever gets to host the Iron Bowl now has such a big advantage in terms of getting those guys on campus that final weekend for such a big game. Is always going to be such a great atmosphere. It's always going to be a great game. If Auburn can win the Iron Bowl to get to 8 wins, to get to 9 wins or something like that, think about how well the staff has recruited. Think about how well they could recruit with that huge momentum surge that they get right before signing day and after having a good season. Now that has to happen. If you fall flat on your face and you go 6-6 or 7-5 this fall, recruiting is not going to take care of itself, and we'll see what happens from there. But point being, everything is lined up for you to still sign a great class. May not look like that right now. People might not feel very optimistic about that right now. It's hard for people to get fired up about recruiting right now, not only because things aren't going super well, but recruiting and commitments in the summer just don't matter as much as they used to. But everything is still there for Auburn. And I'm not trying to sell hopium. I'm not trying to paint sunshine for everybody. I'm just telling you, that's the way I'm looking at it. This staff didn't forget how to recruit. I can promise you that.
Yeah, I mean, you've been very truthful for years to listeners and subscribers. I think there's no reason to think that. I mean, look, we were here when things were very bad in recruiting, and we've been here now where things are very good in recruiting. And I think it's just a different beast nowadays. And I think you sort of alluded to it there. It's easy to say this feels like a year where Auburn's going to do more damage toward the end. Like I was reading here, you're talking about CD Morgan and your in or out story. And you said, well, if Auburn's going to get him, it's going to be later on. Feels like that for a lot of these guys. That's easier said than done, because it's like, you'll just wait. It doesn't matter. You committed somewhere else. You'll just wait till the end. Like, that's the easy thing to say. However, the way this class is shaping out, the way Auburn is shaping up this season, where it is so important what they're going to do on the field, kind of feels that way. At the same time, that's a precarious spot to be in. That's a little bit more of a tightrope than like last year. They can kind of do whatever, and they'll have a top 15, top 10 class, like pretty much regardless. But we knew that was going to be the case. Welcome to year 3, where things start to matter and the pressure is on.
Yeah, I mean, look, you would obviously rather have most of your class committed going into the season. Last year, Auburn had almost all of its class committed before the season started. Fell flat on its face during the season, kept the majority of its class, got some guys late, and signed a top 10 class. This year, it's not going to be the same recipe. Recruiting is not always the same. Last year, Auburn dominated the state of Alabama. This year, it kind of looks like Alabama's going to win the state of Alabama. Not necessarily by a wide margin, but it feels like after that first year, it feels like that staff, they've built relationships. And I'm sure from people above them have said, look, we can't lose this many guys to Auburn in our own state. That can't happen. That can't happen again. What I'm saying is recruiting is never the same. There is never the same recruitment. Things can feel similar, but there are different factors. Everything changes every year. And this is a different cycle. People are saying, oh, this feels like Harsin recruiting again. It's not Harsin recruiting. They were recruiting at a much higher level. If they were recruiting the players that Brian Harsin was recruiting, that was my point earlier. They would have 20 commitments right now. They could get 20 of those guys. But that's not who they're going after. I mean, they're still number 1 safety in the country, Braylon Womack. Number 2 receiver in the country, Sedarian Morgan. Number 3 safety in the country, Jair Edwards. Tank Jones, 5-star edge. Zion Ely in contention for the number 1 player in the country. They're going after top guys still. They're not going to just start going after lower tier guys to get commitments. They still believe that they should be recruiting at that level, and they should. And then it'll be on them to put a product on the field this fall.
We'll get to a question here just real quick. 5 Adam on YouTube. Congratulations to you, my friend. You are our sole comment right now, and so you will get an entire question. He just asks, where do you think Anthony Tank Jones commits? You just mentioned him. Guy who's been on campus several times. One of the best defensive line players in the country.
That's a tough question to answer because I do not have a great feel for his recruitment. I think he is still very, very... He's taken almost all of his official visits. I think he has 1 more remaining right now this upcoming weekend, although I'm not entirely sure about that. He might have Alabama left. I don't know if he's taken his Alabama one yet, but he's been to Auburn. He's been to Texas A&M. He's been to Oregon. Alabama is the other main contender. I don't know if he's visited there quite yet. But I could see this one going a lot of different ways. There are some folks at Auburn that feel like they're trending back in a positive direction for him. Alabama has had momentum for a couple of months with his recruitment. Alabama historically has done very well in the Mobile area and at St. Paul's. So pulling him out of there will be tough. I also get a weird feeling about his recruitment. Maybe I'm still a little spooked after Naeem offered and he went to Oregon. But something about Tank Jones's recruitment to me feels, this is not intel based. This is entirely feel. This is gut feel. Kind of feels like Texas A&M or Oregon could pull off a stunner there and pull him out of the state. Maybe they don't sign him. Maybe they do sign him. Maybe he commits to an in-state school and then he flips to an out-of-state school. Maybe he commits to an out-of-state school and then he flips to an in-state school. Maybe neither of those happen. I kind of just get a weird feeling. Something about his recruitment feels like Oregon or Texas A&M to me. But with that said, there's some confidence at Auburn. There's some confidence at Alabama, and there's confidence at those other schools as well. I think he is playing his cards very close to the vest. I think I just messed up that phrase, but it's been a long month. It's been like half the month, but it's been a long half the month. But he could go a lot of different ways. And I know that's not a very good answer. I kind of just dodged around the question, but that's kind of how I feel like his recruitment is right now.
It's solid. It's better than when I got asked some recruiting questions on the radio today, which was, where does Auburn go at linebacker? And Aligun Ali, am I getting that correct?
Aligun Ali, yep.
He was one of my favorite interviews a couple weeks ago, and I remembered that he was kind of a sneaky guy on this board that DJ Durkin absolutely loves. And it's not like there are like super power programs in the running for him. I think it was Oklahoma, North Carolina, Kentucky were the ones he mentioned. And I just completely blanked and forgot about him. Like, one of
that's
more
not your
intriguing
job.
players in the class.
That's not your job.
That's fine. That's fine. Well, Christian, unless there's anything else you want to hit on, gone about 40 minutes here. Of course, we're going to continue to, just because official visits are about to be done, like you mentioned, it is about to get really busy in terms of the timetable, in terms of the phone notifications the staff has on for a lot of these guys are about to start going off. And as such, wow, that was incredible timing. Can I just say, of you getting a phone notification right there? As such, Christian, like the board will start to get, I feel like maybe Auburn is in a different position than some of these schools, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, just simply because I think coincidence, a lot of these guys they're after, I think things will start to shake out and get clearer in the next 2 or 3 weeks when some commitments start popping. I think the guys that they've been in on have all been waiting around this time. And I know that's pretty commonly the case for 2026, for guys to commit June, July, August going into their senior year. But obviously in the next few weeks, I think we'll start to get a better idea because you start crossing some names off the board. You start highlighting some names saying we're not giving up on this guy. We're going to go all the way till signing day. And so I think some of that stuff will start to get a little bit clearer.
I think so. It'll get clearer. I'll start my big boards, or I think I called them big boards last year. Start those up again here soon as well. That'll be good for everyone to have a visual, percentages, stuff like that. Look, it's going to be interesting. Hang in there. I promise everyone it will be okay. Signing day is not in June. It's in December. We'll see what happens. But I feel very confident that if the staff does well, the recruiting will follow in this class. And it's not like Auburn's class is bad right now. I mean, it's not very big, but it's not bad. You've got 7 commits. Hezekiah Harris, number 103 player in the country. Devin Carter, number 135 player in the country. Toodel, 4-star. Daenerius Gray, composite 4-star. Parker Pritchett, interior offensive lineman that they like. Wayne Henry up at St. Francis. Eric Perry, a running back that they feel like they can take a chance on. You've got some solid pieces in this class. I mean, just look at the schools that you are still recruiting against to keep those guys. Hezekiah Harris, Tennessee and Florida. Devin Carter, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida State. Shadarius Toodle, Georgia, Michigan, Baylor. Daenerius Gray, Kentucky, Ole Miss. You're recruiting against good schools. Those are good players. Those good schools would not be recruiting them if they weren't good players trying to flip them. It's just my take.
I like it. All good takes around here from you today. I thought it was a very informative show. We can grab this last one here from 5 Adam real quick before we go out. Is Auburn recruiting Trent Seabor 2027? My favorite player in the state of Alabama. Been on Trent Seabor for a long time.
Well, you like him because he's in the band.
That is true. I did forget about that. Yeah, dude plays the saxophone. It's pretty. I doubt he is anymore. Like, let's just be honest. I'd like an update on that.
He posted a tweet with the saxophone not that long ago.
Again? Wow.
Yeah. So, and he's learning golf. He's been posting golf videos. So he's becoming one of my favorites as well because of that.
My goat.
To answer the question, 5 Adam, yes, Auburn's recruiting him. He was in with Thompson last week at the 7-on-7 camp. Jason had an update over at auburnundercover.com talking with Trent afterwards. Found it very interesting that of the 2 days of 7-on-7, the main time saw Hugh Freeze the most was when Thompson was playing in the championship game, just standing right behind Seaborn, keeping an eye on him, seeing kind of how he operates and how he moves. So the answer is yes. Where he sits on the 2027 quarterback recruiting board, too early to tell. They still don't have a 2026 guy, but he's definitely a guy that they're keeping an eye on in that class in recruiting.
Has he gotten a much taller? Because I think the thing about Seaborn was like everyone was so exposed to him at such a young age because he won that state championship as an 8th grader. And he was really tiny because he was in 8th grade. And so like, that's my visual of him in my head. I mean, and I always sort of thought, hey, if he gets like 6'1", 6'2" plus, like he's going to be super highly rated.
He's probably 6'1.5" in cleats. He's gotten bigger and he's gotten more athletic as well. At the end of last season, he was running more, ripped off like a 70-yard run against Auburn High, ripped off a couple big runs against Central in the state title game in Birmingham as well. He's not going to blow you away. He's not going to have the strongest arm, but he is one of the most accurate, one of the most precise quarterbacks in the class. When you play in Mark Freeman's offense at Thompson, your field vision is going to be incredible, and his is top notch. I mean, he is so far ahead of other guys in terms of being able to process what's going on the field at his age. That is where he is more advanced than anyone else.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, we kind of got the first glimpses of 2026 this time last year. Now I feel like maybe there's not so much of we're not looking ahead as much. Like it was Big Cat last year where they were the number 1 class, right? For 2026, like that day,
yeah.
Hezekiah Harris committed. Feels like we're not doing that as much this time of year. We're not looking forward to 2027 as much as we were looking forward to 2026 last year.
Not quite as much, but you did just flip Jaylen Scott, top
That's
100
true.
player from Florida State. So not quite as much, but it's definitely still you built yourself a nice little foundation by getting your first commitment in Jaylen Scott. Williamson, safety, for those that don't know.
Anthony Rudd on YouTube is going to get in under the wire here. He asks, why do you think it went south with Jared Edwards? He said, I thought that Maryland pipeline was ours.
Ooh, good question. I mean, Auburn has always been in the mix. Don't know if Auburn was ever fully the favorite. After he officially visited and I did my in or out, I said in. I said that I think he will commit somewhere else on July 5th, and I think Auburn can swing him late. I still stand by that being a possibility, although swinging him from Alabama will be tough. And if you get Braylon Womack, I'm really not sure how much money you're going to invest into another top-tier safety guy. But Alabama has impressed him a ton. He likes the development there. Whether or not the new staff at Alabama can prove the development, that remains to be seen. I mean, they're still entering into year 2. There's still a ways to go there, but historically what Alabama has done with defensive backs and sending them to the NFL, you cannot argue with that at all. And it just feels like Alabama has really taken the momentum in his recruitment. NIL is a factor, but I don't think Auburn was blown out of the water. Like, I don't think Auburn's offer was not comparable, or revenue sharing, or NIL, or whatever you want to call it. But that's when Auburn's going to be in on until the end. Even if they get Braylon Womack, they're not going to stop recruiting Jair Edwards. Wayne Henry is his best friend. He's going to keep visiting Auburn. We even asked him after his official visit, said, look, when you commit on July 5th, are you done, or are you going to keep taking visits? He said, no, I'm going to keep taking visits. I'm going to be here for the Georgia game and for the Iron Bowl. So he'll be back probably 2 more times. And that's another one. What if he commits to Alabama, and what if Auburn has a great season and wins the Iron Bowl right before signing day? Who knows? I mean, it's June 17th. We're spitballing here, but that'll be a fun one to watch, because Auburn is going to be in it until the very end. And that the Maryland pipeline that you brought up, Anthony, it's not gone. It's not gone. Those St. Francis guys love Auburn.
Yeah, I was just writing about it for my column tomorrow morning. Like, the fact that last week we get the confirmation that, I think you just mentioned, like, a Georgia visit, the Georgia home game being a night game, it's not completely insignificant. And I was really sad for SEC on CBS to go, because obviously it's tremendous and it's historic, but you're going to get this a lot more with ESPN. You're going to get the option for night games for Georgia and Alabama, because they're not going to be so tradition attached to, like, the 2:30 slot. I just thought of that really quickly, but yeah, like, that is an absolutely massive, opportunity for you in week 7, because if things are going kind of rough, like, you drop a couple of those games out west and you're not feeling so hot, you can get right back on the horse with a win over Georgia at home at night. And on the flip side, if you're in a great spot and you've won most of those games, you only have like 1 loss, and you beat somebody like Georgia, all of a sudden your expectations change in a big way for year 3. And so, you just mentioned the Georgia visit, so I just thought about that. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and call it here. We've been almost 50 minutes, Christian, unless there's anything else. I think
Anthony has one question that you can answer within 15 seconds if you want to answer one more.
Is Todd Pettiford on campus? So I talked to his dad just a few days ago. He said the plan was for him to come either late this week or early next week, if he's a few days ahead of schedule on that. I am not entirely sure, but I do believe it'll be within the next, like, if he's not already on campus, it'll be within the next few days. They knew that he was going to take some time after the draft process. It was like a day. It was a daily. I mean, that was very taxing. His dad was kind of talking about.
I mean, it was right after the season ended too.
I can imagine. Yeah, and just the calendar being like, it was all very. It was as smooth as it could have been, because Todd had already communicated to the staff what he wanted to do even before the season ended. Like, that was no surprise. You go test the waters. He had already communicated to them that he wasn't going to leave either. Like, his family was like, his dad told me, he's like, that was never an option. Like, why in the world would you leave when you're going to be the starting point guard of a team that just went to the Final Four? And so that whole thing was as smooth as possible, but it's still, I mean, it's just a slog to get through that and communicate with teams day after day after day. So I think they were trying to just give him a little bit of time. And also the stuff they are running through, I just will say really quickly, the stuff they're running through in practice right now is sort of set the table, baseline, get the fundamentals down of like how they run their stuff, and like legitimately like how Damon Davis wants you to lift this weight, and like what this suicide drill looks like literally, like they're just setting up how they want these players to operate on a daily basis, because literally all these guys are new. So I mean, Todd Pettiford like doesn't need any of that, and he's obviously been in great basketball shape because he's been working out in NBA facilities and with NBA personnel. So and then Filip Jovic has been completely released from the pro league over there in Serbia. He is completely ready to roll. It's just a matter of how fast he gets that stuff processed, how quickly he and his and whoever else is coming over with him, if anybody at all, coming over to the States. And so it's completely in his hands now. I wouldn't expect that to take more than another probably couple weeks at the latest. So yeah, that's
there
that.
we go. Wrap it up. What turned into, thought it would be a short show, turned into a long show over 40, over 50 minutes actually.
That's all right. The power couldn't even keep us off. I will say, like, I did have a brain fart saying the words, "I'm gonna go get my phone charger," when, by the way, the power just went out, so like you can't charge your phone. But I had it plugged into a hotspot on my computer, like the computer USB, which has extra. So a little pro tip there: if you're ever like, my phone's dead, my power's out, if you have a laptop computer with a USB, plug it into that, use up all the charge you can. I'm just gonna act like I meant to do that the whole time.
Well, now you've outed yourself. But...
Well, I don't really care. I have no shame, so I just kind of wanted everyone to be aware of that. But alrighty, well, we'll go ahead and wrap it. Appreciate everybody for joining us today. We are still running our sale. We've gone 52 minutes without promoting ourselves, so we'll sell out here a little bit at the end. 50% off still. It's through the end of the month. You can try us for $1 for your first month. So if you are not subscribed over at Auburn Undercover, if you have $1 to spare, por favor, you can give us a try. And all our VIP stuff, all of Christian's wonderful recruiting coverage, all of Jason's stuff, all of Philip's columns, all of my off-season stuff, whatever Nathan's doing, which it changes by the day in June and July. But we've had a lot of fun VIP stuff. I think it's been a fun off-season, all things considered. Had a good time with it. And so if you would like to come check out our community, please go give us a look. If you just go to our homepage, auburnundercover.com, there should be a link there somewhere on the homepage. I
will self-promo a little bit. Tomorrow on Wednesday, by the time people listen to this, I will have a story. We polled Darian Morgan and Braylon Womack, so a pair of 5 stars, and Devin Carter, polled them on NIL and revenue sharing, got honest answers about what schools have been telling them, how they're approaching things. Are schools paying for their commitments? How do they approach potential bidding wars, stuff like that? Got some really great answers. So going to have a story on that on Wednesday. I think that will be worth $1 alone. So
okay,
yeah. So we'll see. I think it'll be a very interesting story.
Were they pretty open in their responses?
Yeah, they were really, really good. So I think it'll be some really interesting things that people will enjoy reading on Wednesday. So you can look forward to that if you're watching live tonight. You can go over to auburnundercover.com if you listen to that on Wednesday and check it out as well. So have that. So that's kind of the last thing for me. One more quick thing. If he's listening, shout out to Michael at the gym. Got to meet him. Great guy. Not going to out exactly which gym it was, but he was great. Talking with him for a little bit, said he's a fan, said he enjoys listening, which we always appreciate. I know Nathan appreciates it more because he's big into the fame and big into following and stuff like that.
I was wondering where you're going with that.
But no, on a serious note, really appreciate Michael. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. Appreciate Michael for saying something. Appreciate anyone that follows our work, especially now while things are really quiet for the rest of this summer, and helping us keep doing what we love. So
I don't know what you're talking about. This is a blue collar stream. Yeah, we're putting in the work here. Yeah, everything Christian said, go check us out, auburnundercover.com. We will catch you guys later with another show at some point within the next little while. I appreciate everybody for joining, and we'll talk to you all soon.